Stay connected with the world through WION. Like the page on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter for new alerts. Instagram for videos and images. And the website for the latest news, views, and analysis. WIONews.com. World is one.
On WION Live Broadcast from New York, we look at after the Wagner chief's aborted mutiny, the Chechen leader is eager to demonstrate his loyalty towards the Russian president. Unrest in France is growing following the fatal police shooting of a teenage boy. Paris is burning for the third night running as pitched battles are being fought in the suburbs. And finally, we try to understand if we're seeing a new era in the US education system after the top court bans use of race in university admissions. All this and lot more at these times only on WION.
Hi everyone, welcome to WION Live Broadcast, New York City. I'm Susan Tehrani. First, let's take a look at the latest stories making headlines this hour. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says that Russia will emerge stronger after a failed mutiny by Wagner Group mercenaries, so the West need not worry about stability in the world's biggest nuclear power. Calling violence unjustifiable, French President Emmanuel Macron urges parents to keep child rioters off the streets. He also says that a third of the 875 people arrested overnight for rioting. Some 64 flights were canceled at Geneva's international airport after operations were halted for several hours following a strike over a wage dispute. South Africa's corruption watchdog absolves President Cyril Ramaphosa of allegations that he breached executive ethics in a foreign cash scandal that spawned into one of the biggest storms of his career. The countdown begins for tennis's most prestigious event. Novak Djokovic and Carlos Alcaraz have the proverbial luck of the draw on their side, but Iga Swiatek faces a tricky start to her campaign.
Who had a good run herself into a first grass court quarter-final, but once there was only one player really in it, certainly from that second.
As the dust settles after the Wagner mutiny, the question is who will replace the Wagner Group in Russia? Who will provide the Russian president with the extra assistance in the war? Well, there is one group waiting to take that place, and that is Chechen leader Ramzan Kadyrov. Kadyrov is positioning himself as a warlord ready to go into battle for Vladimir Putin. But unlike the paramilitary Wagner Group, which Moscow is now seeking to disband, Chechen special forces have earned a reputation as TikTok fighters. Why? Because they are more concerned with their social media appearance than battlefield successes. Following Wagner chief's rebellion in Russia, the Chechen leader has sought to show his close ties with the Russian president. On his social media page, he can be seen posting a selfie with Putin, Interestingly, hours after Prigozhin's march on Moscow, the Chechen leader's battalion posted a video showing its forces dramatically patrolling a deserted bridge, dressed head to toe in camouflage and armed with machine guns. However, there was one problem with the footage. It appears to have been filmed during Moscow's sunset on Saturday. This was after Prigozhin's insurrection had already ended. Moreover, it is said to have been shot in Horst Roma, a city Wagner fighters never came close during the uprising. The record of the Chechen fighters raises a question. Will they be able to provide the Russian military with support comparable to that of the Wagner group? To give us more insight, we are now being joined by Elizabeth Braw from Washington, D.C. She's a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Elizabeth, welcome back to WION. Thank you so much for joining us. So how serious is this story where these Chechen fighters may take the place of the Wagner group as we speak?
Well, at the moment, everything in Russia is unpredictable, and they may well take the place of Wagner soldiers, but that doesn't mean that they'll be any good. If there's anything that is true in military campaign, or when it comes to the military and generally, it is that the people who like posing in military uniforms and with weapons are the sort of people who you wouldn't want anywhere near your war fighting, because they are just not very good. They're more concerned about appearances, and that is indeed the case with Kadyrov and his troops. A proper military is disciplined, doesn't like to spend its time parading its stuff to the general public, and also has proper discipline, and that's something that Kadyrov and his men don't have. We have no idea how loyal, how obedient they would be to the Russian command and control structure in the Ukraine war.
Do you think we're getting ahead of ourselves with these headlines here about this Chechen group, and Vladimir Putin is not even considering them to take the place of Wagner?
Well, the problem in an authoritarian country is that decisions can be made very quickly and without much advance warning at all. So we have no way of knowing. We, the general public, have no way of knowing what sort of decision, what sort of thinking is going on in Vladimir Putin's head at the moment. And in a democracy, you would have a proper consultation between the government and parliament and between different parts of the government. Not so in an authoritarian country, which adds to the uncertainty in trying to understand what it is that Putin will do next. But that said, even if he does get some Chechen fighters to Ukraine, they are very brutal, but they are not very professional. So they won't win this war for him.
Great. Elizabeth Braw, thank you so much for joining us from Washington, D.C. this morning. And I look forward to speaking to you again very soon. India is planning to integrate made-in-India missiles on Predator drones, which are being acquired from the U.S. under the latest military sales deal after Prime Minister Modi's visit to the U.S. in June. The defense forces are in the process of identifying indigenously developed weapon systems which can be equipped on these drones when they arrive. The MQ-9B drones will be assembled in India. The UAVs will enhance the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capabilities of the nation's armed forces across domains. General Atomics will establish a global maintenance, repair, and overhaul facility in India. New Delhi is looking to equip the drones with made-in-India weapons. Remember, defense indigenization is among the key priorities of the Narendra Modi government. Let's now take a look at key details about the MQ-9B Sea Guardian drone. The drone can hit an altitude of over 40,000 feet. It has an endurance of more than 30 hours. The Sea Guardian can achieve 210 knots true airspeed. The maximum range is over 5,000 nautical miles. The internal payload capacity is 363 kilograms, while the external payload capacity is over 2,000 kilograms. There are 9 external hard points as well. The drone has a maximum gross takeoff weight of more than 5,000 kilograms. France has witnessed the third night of chaos. Riots continue across the country after a series of criticism. French President Emmanuel Macron came up with a string of suggestions and announcements after he conducted another round of crisis meetings. With his leaders, Macron called on parents to keep their children off the streets. He claimed around 875 people are arrested overnight for the rioting. Macron added that around a third of that number are young or very young. He also said additional security forces will be deployed to control the nationwide unrest as he denounced the unacceptable exploitation of a death of an adolescent. Macron urged a social media platform to work with authorities to help calm the situation.
In the next hours, we will take measures, and we have started taking measures in the coordination with these platforms to remove the most sensitive content. The state services are working in coordination with these platforms to obtain an effective response, and I expect these platforms to have a spirit of responsibility.
Meanwhile, the situation in France is escalating. On Tuesday, a police officer fatally shot a 17-year-old teenager. Protesters are torching vehicles, town halls across the country as well. Visuals coming from Paris show the complete devastation of the city center. In the Parisian suburb of Aubervilliers, fireworks were set off, and a swimming pool construction site was set ablaze as well. The company in charge of the Olympic Games for Paris 2024 said that the facade of a Paris Olympics training center was damaged during rioting. French authorities are saying that they are assuring more security for other Olympic sites as well. Take a listen. Similarly, on the streets of Aubervilliers, charred buses were lined up. Hundreds of police officers were injured in the chaos. In Paris, angry mob attacked a Nike store. Online footage shows huge crowds of protesters attempting to break into the Nike sportswear shop in central Paris. The U.S. Supreme Court is set to have banned universities from using race as a factor for university admissions. However, they made clear that this is not a quote-unquote blanket ban. This marks the start of a new era in higher education, as it is a reversal of a decade-old practice that claimed to boost opportunities for African Americans and other minorities. The justices voted 6-3 along party lines after years of conservative antipathy and affirmative action policies that have sought diversity in school admissions and businesses and government hiring as well. The court said that universities were free to consider an individual applicant's personal experience, whether, for example, they grew up experiencing racism or not, in weighing their application over applicants more academically qualified, but deciding primarily based on whether the applicant is African American or another minority is in itself racial discrimination. Following the Supreme Court's ruling, President Joe Biden has strongly disagreed with the ruling. Biden says that the ruling has walked away from decades of precedent, further adding that universities should not abandon their commitment to create diverse student bodies.
Discrimination still exists in America. Discrimination still exists in America. Discrimination still exists in America. Today's decision does not change that. It's a simple fact. If a student had to overcome adversity on their path to education, the college should recognize and value that.
Asked by reporters if Thursday's decision by the conservative-dominated panel, which also voted last year to overturn a nationwide rights to abortion showed it was a rogue court, Biden took a lengthy pause before finally saying that, quote unquote, this is not a normal court. Meanwhile, it was not just the president who has put forward his thoughts following the ruling. Lawmakers, legal experts, presidential candidates past and present, and others are also reacting to it. The Obamas condemned the decision taken by the top court. Former First Lady Michelle Obama wrote about her own experience as one of the few black students on her college campus. In a statement, she said, "Today, my heart breaks for any young person out there who's wondering what their future holds and what kind of chances will be open to them." Former President Barack Obama, in a short statement, said that, like any policy, affirmative action wasn't perfect, but it allowed a generation of students like Michelle and me to prove we belonged. Meanwhile, former President Donald Trump has hailed the decision. Trump said that it was a great day for America. He believes people with extraordinary ability and everything else that are necessary for success are finally being awarded. Former Vice President Mike Pence, who is running against Trump in the GOP presidential primary, issued his own statement praising the ruling. He said that there is no place for discrimination based on race in the United States. Women applying for jobs in billionaire businessman Bill Gates' private firm face sexually explicit questions from the interviewers. A report from Wall Street Journal has claimed that this is the latest controversy to have surfaced linked to the Microsoft co-founder. As per the Wall Street Journal report, the women who had applied for roles in Gates' ventures were asked multiple questions on their private life. This was done as part of the background check by a security consulting firm called Concentric Advisors, which was tasked with a purpose. According to the Wall Street Journal, multiple women were questioned on whether they had any extramarital affairs, nude photos on their cell phones, or whether they had ever danced for money, along with other things related to their sexual history. Candidates believe that the interviewers were attempting to find information that could be used to blackmail them later on in their career. They also said that they had never volunteered to give such sensitive information, which they claimed was asked as part of a company's assessment test. However, both Gates Ventures and Concentric Advisors have rejected the report. Gates Ventures says that they are not aware of whether the consulting firm posed such questions to candidates. It further said that these allegations, if true, would constitute breach of the agreement between the two firms. Meanwhile, that firm also denied asking such questions to prospective employees, but it said that the security screening done was done aimed at assessing a candidate's truthfulness and vulnerability to blackmail. It's hard to believe, but it's been 2 months since the writers' strike began in Hollywood. And in these past 60 days, many shows have been halted. Filmmakers have reshuffled their release schedules and studios have lost billions of dollars. But now, small businesses in Los Angeles and beyond are also taking a hit. More details in our next report.
We'll never be defeated. United, we'll never be defeated. On May the 2nd, 2023, thousands of Hollywood screenwriters went on strike after last-minute talks with major studios over wages broke down. The strike is now entering its third month. The Writers Guild of America estimates that the strike is costing California's economy $30 million per day, which is a fairly huge amount. Earlier, it was only the big studios who were suffering. But now, businesses are struggling as the strike ripples through Hollywood's economy. Florists, caterers, costume suppliers and others are witnessing their orders dwindle as many are still recovering from disruptions caused by COVID-19. This is Pam Elia. She is the co-owner of a prop house called History for Hire in Los Angeles. Before the strike, PAM filled an average of 53 requests per week for various kinds of props. Now, due to the strike, the weekly orders have been reduced to an average of 26.
Businesses like that do what I do, there's hundreds of thousands of us in this town that, if I'm not renting to shows, that means I'm not using the dry cleaner, I'm not using the guy who does the plating, I'm not using the welders. So everybody gets affected straight across the board.
She estimates the revenue of the company has dropped by 60% and it is falling $100,000 short of meeting monthly expenses.
The biggest toll of a strike, of course, is the human toll, and it is the amount of people that they get marginalized, which is horrible. I mean, everybody in this business is important, above the line, below the line, and those of us that work below the credits, that we run small businesses. And even though there is a strike going on and there's a work stoppage, it doesn't stop my staff's rent. It certainly doesn't stop my rent. It doesn't stop our utilities. It doesn't stop our cost of living.
Meanwhile, Sassy Craft Services, which provides food and drink to sets in Los Angeles, used to book about 8 jobs per month with productions for companies including Netflix and HBO. Due to the strike, that has dropped to about 3. The owner of the services is now considering diversifying her income sources by becoming a Pilates instructor. It remains unclear how long the Writers Guild of America strike against studios and streamers in the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers will continue. But industry analysts estimate it won't be resolved before September. Some have suggested that accepting the Writers Guild proposal would ultimately be cheaper for studios. The 100-day WGA strike in 2007 to 2008 resulted in the loss of 37,700 jobs in California and cost the state $2.1 billion in lost output. It took months for the impact to become clear as restaurants, logistics companies and cleaning services cut staff. Though economists say it is too early to measure the full economic toll of the 2023 writers' strike. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Stand in solidarity with you. We're here with you in the fight.
Let's wrap up in the world of sports, where NBA star James Harden has picked up his $35.6 million contract option for next season with the Philadelphia 76ers, but it's highly unlikely that he will stay at the franchise. The 76ers will explore trade options for the 10-time All-Star in the offseason. Let's break it down for you and tell you what all this means. The 33-year-old informed the 76ers of his decision on Thursday ahead of a midnight deadline. He was initially expected to decline that option so he could sign a more lucrative contract with the 76ers or become a free agent. However, the 76ers are not in a position to offer him a long-term deal given their limited cap space, and they were also not willing to make such a strong commitment to him. Harden believes that by opting in, it would allow him to work with the 76ers to conjure up a trade